Hi everyone, welcome to Civic Tech Calgary. This is our May meetup, and it's great to see all of you online this evening. And we'll have our special presentation from Tim Lipp in just a few minutes or so. But some of you might be new to Civic Tech Calgary, so just a little bit of background on who we are and what we're up to. So we're a community-based group. We're all volunteers, and we're part of this much larger global movement to leverage technology for public good. So we come together on a monthly basis, and sometimes a couple times a year we'll do hackathons as well. And we work through projects. So we get ideas from members like yourself. Great ideas that we serve to make Calgary an even better place to live. So over the last few years, we've developed a volunteer app called Volley. We've worked on explorations of blockchain for social good. We've recently launched a project on using Fitbit data and other wearable technology data for the use by the city of Calgary and the university, as well as Civic Tech. Just a few examples of our projects. So all of this is the use of technology and data and design to address some of the challenges that citizens and governments are facing, and to pursue those opportunities that are out there for more engagement and more effective services, and again, making Calgary a better place to live. So we really see ourselves as a connector in the ecosystem, starting off with the citizens and the communities, striving for social innovation and civic society coming together. Bring in the government folks, City of Calgary and others, some of the initiatives there around open data and civic innovation. The startup community, entrepreneurs and universities, together with the private sector and all the industry and technologies and alliances that are out there as well. So we have members from all these groups as part of our group. We're approaching 700 members of Civic Tech, and that's great. So tell your friends all about it. So our meetups are typically on the second Tuesday of each month. You guys have registered through our meetup site, and that's the way to sign up and also get aware of the various events that are running. We do have a website, CivicTechYYC.ca, where there's information on our projects and other things there. And our Twitter handle is @CivicTechYYC. So great to get some traffic this evening. We do have a newsletter that we push out once a month, and you can sign up for that through our website. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen. And we're really excited to have with us this evening Tim Lipp, who's a really interesting guy, as you're going to find out very shortly, has a lot of irons in the fire. And he'll be talking to us about the adventures and failures during COVID-19 and some of the exciting news he has around his startup ventures, as well as the work that he's been doing in the community. Some really good work in the community. So without further ado, Tim, I think you'll be introducing yourself and providing more background, but over to you so you can share your screen and take it over.
Cool, thank you, Jeff. Here we go. Screen sharing commencing. I believe you have liftoff and should be live. If you can't hear me, oh, spoiler alert, just jumped right to the end. Don't want to do that. Start with the lovely launch page. Okay, I think everyone should be able to hear me.
Yeah,
Thanks,
good.
first of all, Jeff, for the opportunity to do this and to the whole CivicTechYYC community. I've been to a bunch of the events. The first one I went to was about 3 years ago, hearing Gerald talk about Calgary dollars, and I really was inspired and have enjoyed every chance I've had to come to an event since then. So yeah, thank you for this opportunity to share what we're doing. I'm really excited about it, and look forward to also, please write down lots of questions, because although I have 45 slides, I do not want to talk for 45 minutes. I'm going to try to go through them quickly because I love to have conversations. So first of all, I want to recognize that we are on traditional Treaty 7 territories of the Blackfoot, Stoney Nakoda, Niitsitapi, and and this is also home to Region 3 of the Métis Nation. That's really important for me to share that, because I know when I don't feel especially grounded or feel stressed out, having a connection to my family heritage and my sense of place is really important. And I think it's really important we acknowledge that. So the way this is going to work is I have 5 main sections: introduction, kind of the backstory, COVID-19 and how we responded, 5 specific tactics and lessons I've learned, and then finally, conclusion. You'll see the little dandelion thing on the top right corner. That's because I really like interaction, so I'm trying something interesting. There are 5 of those hidden on slides throughout the presentation. If I get like 10 people who raise their hand when they see one on that slide, I will read a poem that I wrote. And I'm not doing that to pull a Vogan form of torture on you, but it's more because I find poetry is a way that grounds me. And it also is, I think, speaks to a way to explore the world that a lot of the business community doesn't use, and it's something that's been used for generations, for thousands and thousands of years. So there's like an activity you can do during the talk. A bit of my personal background come from Eastern European heritage. Both my grandparents were refugees from, both sets of grandparents from the USSR and some of the Gulag horrors there. So that's a really important part of my story. Come from a family of 10 kids. So different, a bit of an interesting sociological culture of myself. I love my parents to bits. We don't agree on all of the issues, but I really, really am grateful for my background. Done a bunch of different stuff in the research space, published some things, anything from related to economics to sociolinguistics, and also in business, won a ton of different accounting and data analytics competitions, both in university and when I was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers as a financial auditor. 3 of the key kind of parts of my past experience are, first of all, I lived in Nepal for 2 years, working as a sociolinguistic researcher for the organization that does, that essentially manages all the languages in the world, or the classification of all those languages. So published a big report there, and that's what the first picture is from. The middle one is from when I ran a retail store at the Calgary Farmers Market selling ultra-sustainable consumer goods, and that's gonna come back later. And the one on the top right is from kind of school-based social enterprise I ran in Kenya, training Kenyan entrepreneurs to build and sell high-efficiency cook stoves. Oh, and you know, I'm at the end of the slide, I only saw 2 hands. Maybe they came up earlier. So I feel like I should just skip over the, yeah, we'll go, there's more poems. You can, if you want to hear poems, you can raise your hands later. If not, I won't be offended. Just be your loss. Anyway, so now what I'm doing is, I'm a game architect for an app called Beaver Lodge. I'm going to be talking a lot about that later, but you can see the summary of it right here. Essentially, it's very simple in its layout, and that is by design. The premise we're building behind it essentially is a tool for people to do self-guided energy audits of their house. But we're communicating it as a game for a couple different reasons. The biggest reason why is because I think when we turn big, super complex problems, of which climate change is one, and of which a lot of the other environmental and social challenges we have, when you turn them into games, it makes them a lot more manageable and also a lot more interesting. wouldn't be able to do this without myself, but all by myself. And there have been a lot of different really key players. So I've been really pursuing this vision for about a year. Started out as an idea, worked on it, explored a lot over the summer, brought on some really cool team members, Kilon Care and a few other people. We submitted a business plan to the Trico Charitable Foundation, who had a social enterprise competition back in November, and ended up winning 25 grand, which really kickstarted the journey. And then shortly after that, met this guy Gio, who's an absolute whiz with technology, and gave us, him and I were chatting, we were like, well, why don't we try to, you got some money, I have an idea, why don't we try to build an app? And that kickstarted a really, really fast, rapid prototyping process, middle of December, and we launched the app in April, which I think is a real testament to how incredible Gio and our just teamwork is, because usually for an app like what we built would cost at least $50,000 for one app store, and Gio was able to manage and orchestrate it all, including managing my frenetic brain, to pull it off in less than 3-4 months with a budget of 20 grand or less, which is extremely impressive. We're also a part of a couple different accelerator programs and have really other great team members like Kelsey Pide, who's also on the call. Thanks for joining, team, to hear me talk at my webcam, which is what it feels like. But, okay, so how did we get to where we are, where we have 2 apps on the App Store? It really came from a couple different things. After the social enterprise I had in Kenya, I realized that one of the really big challenges when you're trying to solve a social problem, if you're not familiar with why clean cook stoves are a problem, roughly 4.3 million people in the world die each year because of cooking smoke inhalation, which is why I thought, well, this is a problem. I feel like it could be solved. Having more efficient cook stoves can't be that hard. So we found a really cool design, took it to a pitch competition, won over 30 grand, and then went to Kenya with this fantastic product and got some initial traction. I built some great relationships, but at the end of the day, it failed. And that's because although it was perfectly efficient and the technology was outstanding, I think in the grand scheme of things, we failed to incorporate the biggest resource when it comes to problem solving, and that is humans. We didn't build the product in conjunction with the local community. We didn't design, we just kind of took it there, took a cool technological solution and said, here, now use it. You may not know that the biggest supercomputer in the world is called Summit, and it can do 200 petaflops, which uses roughly 13 megawatts for all of its really complex computations. I'm not sure if you know this, but on the other hand, the human brain can do roughly 1 exaflop at 20 watts. So the sheer efficiency and computation power, I know it's different for the human brain, but the sheer computation power is that much higher, which is why for me, as much as I love technology, I always try to ground myself in saying, okay, what's actually the human approach to this problem? So the big question that drove me as part of that was, how could introverts solve climate change? And that was an interesting question to me for a couple different reasons. First, because my own views on climate change have changed drastically over the course of my life. If you would have met me 10 years ago, there's a very good chance I would have been convincing you, working hard to tell you that climate change was not man-made, it was entirely the wrong issue for us to spend our time and energy on, and was actually an evil plan of world domination and conspiracy theory by the leftists to take over the world. So my perspective has changed a lot, and I realized just how polarizing a lot of climate change is. So I thought maybe if we focus on introvert problem, focus on it from an introvert lens, I should say, it would also be a lot more effective at solving it in a practical way. Because right now, if you want to do anything to solve climate change, the simplest things you can do are go to a protest, which is polarizing and very extrovert focused, or you can go to an event, which is usually preaching to the choir and very extrovert focused. I mean, you can share a post on Facebook, but let's be honest, how much good does sharing posts on Facebook really do? So that was really the question I spent a lot of time exploring. The way I kind of approached it was, okay, let's validate the interestingness and reality of this problem. Let's explore some tentative solutions. And then let's commit to one of those solutions. It's probably wrong, but we're gonna make mistakes, learn along the process, and know a lot more for the next time. And that was kind of the journey I was trying to do as quickly, as rapidly as possible. The main tools we did that with were expert interviews. So based on a couple past things, I had connections to environmental leaders from across the country. So chatting with them about this question, chatting with random people I met, and also doing as much research as I could in the midst of my other responsibilities. The first attempt at coming to an answer to the solution of how introverts could solve climate change was what I call, it was a very direct approach. It was a website called sustainablitz.com, which is not live anymore. I just, one day my bank accidentally gave me $1,000 in my bank account. I told them 3 times that that actually wasn't my money, but lo and behold, they didn't do anything about it. So I was like, okay, I've been given this unintentional grant, and I used it to try to build a website and do some initial pilot testing around sustainablitz.com, which is essentially going to be an action source for introverts. Ways people can be like, oh, I want to solve climate change this way. Do you want to come solve climate change with me? Had a bunch of challenges, never really got off the ground. So I went back to exploring, continued discovering things. A really important conversation happened when I reached out to a friend of mine named Rachel, who I'd known for 10 years. She's a mother with 3 kids. I'd seen her post on Facebook that she was a self-professed introvert, and she had a bunch of different frustrations with life. And I just reached out to her and said, Rachel, I really respect you. I think you're smart. And I have this problem I'm trying to figure out. Can I buy you coffee? And she raised she brought something I thought was very interesting to my attention in her responses, because she used to be a building manager for a bunch of rental properties, working for a really large rental property management company. And she brought something interesting to my attention. And that led to what I'm pursuing now, which is a little bit more of an oblique approach, which, if you don't know the word oblique, it's another word for indirect, but I thought if I put indirect, that would be too direct. So I call it's a bit more of an oblique approach, and it literally was born just with the mental visualization that, the way the rental housing market works, based off the conversation with Rachel, was that she told me that independent landlords are one of the single biggest sources of inefficient homes. And it's not because they don't care about the environment, but it's because most of them, they bought a second house, which they're now planning to flip. And so they don't have the resources to put a ton of investment into making it more efficient. And the renter usually pays the rent anyways. So there's no immediate payoff to them by having a more efficient home, because the renter pays the utility bill. So that made me think, well, maybe we could create some kind of efficiency data thingy that renters who have a passion for climate change, which a lot of renters do, could feed into, and owners who need discounts and a lot of maybe any help they can get to make the house more efficient feed into this thing. And society, which in a lot of ways is really craving for systematic, scalable responses to climate change. So I kind of really started exploring that as much as possible, dug a little bit deeper, and realized after talking to someone who's done over 400 audits with Energy Efficiency Alberta, as one of the best energy auditors in Calgary, he told me about how the way it worked, and this is before the government subsidies appeared, is you as a person, if you want an energy audit done, you would pay $150. Someone would come into your house. They would walk around your house for 2 hours, measuring things, taking some pictures, going into your attic. They would measure the square footage of your house and do a blow dryer door test, walk around with an infrared gun. They would essentially, after you spending $150, the government paying them another $350, because it was a lot of kind of tedious work with the report and everything. they would give you a report which was roughly 80% the exact same as your neighbors. So if you think about that, that means on a street of 5 houses, 80% of a $450 bill for each one of those houses is the exact same. I started to get more interested. You see, I'd been working when this discovery process really started. I'd been working as a financial auditor at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I realized that one of the most important things when you're in the world of auditing is clean data. And really understanding, but once you have that clean data, the amount of similarities and optimizations you can do to provide usefulness from that data is really quite limitless. And so when I encountered that data asymmetry in terms of high cost of very similar data, it made me think maybe there's something we can do in terms of a specific CivicTech solution. That kind of, the reason why I think that kind of, and it kind of built off of my past experience when I had a retail store at the Calgary Farmers Market selling a bunch of sustainable goods, because I discovered a bunch of products then that were aggressively sustainable. So they weren't just like 10% lower carbon footprint than other products. They're actually 20% or like sometimes 50% lower carbon footprint than a lot of other products that existed on the market. The second element that I think really drives the potential for impact behind Beaver Lodge is society has changed over the last 10 years from how it was 10 years ago. The social trend for self-documentation is, I think we can reasonably say it's about 10 times stronger than it was 5-10 years ago, just because of the beautiful blessing or curse, depending on how you look upon it, that social media has given us. And all of that kind of piles into what I think our big audacious goal is for Beaver Lodge, and I think it's feasible, is that I think we can enable 50% reduction in carbon per home over a 3-year period. And what that means is if 50% of the homes in Calgary downloaded our app and went through the kind of plan that we're developing, then roughly over the course of 3 years, their net carbon, both in the short term and the long term, would go down by 50% through a couple different things. I think we have enough people to read a poem before I go on to the next section. So the next section just really touches on, and so that's kind of where we were before I read the poem, and then COVID-19 happened. But let me read the poem because I saw people raise their hand, and I know it's a lot of work to hit a button. So here we go. Nature is always wise. It never lies. It always brings its very best self, its truest self, to where you are. The 4 struggles: man versus man, man versus self, man versus God, man versus nature. But it is not a struggle at all, for we are nature itself, and nature is always wise. So there we are, Beaver Lodge. We're on this exciting, ambitious civic tech mission to reduce home emissions in a drastic way and just overall consumption emissions in a drastic way. And then COVID-19 hit. And since interaction has been so high, I'm going to do one more interaction thing. So we have 3 different ways this presentation can go right now. I can either talk about what we did in spite of COVID-19. If you give me a thumbs up, if you give me a hand up, we'll go like, what are some of the ways this maybe COVID-19 maybe really rethink about civic tech, or what we can do. We can talk about what we did exactly in response to COVID-19 if you don't raise your hand. So if no one raises their hands or does anything, if more people do nothing, then either the first 2 will go with this one, but if more people do thumbs up, we'll go to what we did in spite of COVID-19, and if more people raise their hand, we'll go to hands up.
So just to clarify, at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions button.
Yes,
so that reactions button will allow you to either put your thumb up or put your hand up, or do nothing.
So we got 3 thumbs. This is kind of fun. It's like a polling experience in real time. Got some thumbs, got some hands, more or less non-votes. Can you imagine if we ran political elections this way, where like not voting was also considered a vote? I wonder how, maybe it is. Anyway, I digress. So I think we will jump to what we did because of COVID-19. And I'll talk about all the other ones too. So don't feel like you missed out too much. So we really have, whereas a tech company, we have this really strong social cause driving us. And then the crisis of our time hits, everyone goes home, stock markets all crash, people are stressed out. I mean, there's a lot of things happening. Some people are saying this is going to be worse than the Depression. A lot of young people have never lived through anything like this before. And what did we do in immediate response to that as a company that's really empathy driven, but also cares a lot about technology and how we can bring solutions to help them scale? So the first thing we did was we sent out a survey, kind of following that path of discovery. In total, we got 30 different responses, about 32 responses in total. And it was actually really fascinating for me to see the responses come in. The first and biggest thing that really stood out to me was that people wanted to offer help more than they really needed help. That stood out to me because, as I see it, and it made me realize that one of the biggest challenges for anyone who's trying to be a social entrepreneur in Canada is actually really surprising. And that is the biggest challenge I face, and I think anyone as a social entrepreneur faces in Canada, is that Canada is probably one of the best societies that's ever existed in a lot of respects. We have fantastic healthcare, fantastic institutions. And so if you're a social entrepreneur trying to solve problems, even in the midst of a crisis, there are a lot of other established organizations already designed to solve those problems. So, I mean, social entrepreneurs have a bit of a problem. Like, are there problems big enough to merit us actually not having a regular job, not participating in the regular economy, and going out on our own to solve the world in our own way? Interesting observation that I kind of realized just because of how many people were willing to help, more than people who need help. The other thing I realized is that it's really hard to get feedback, both from organizations we were trying to chat with to see how we could, like when you're trying to offer services, but also to people in general. And as a result of that, my team and I kind of decided on a little bit more of an artistic approach. And what I mean by that is we weren't going to go and conduct massive studies and say, we're only going to build a solution to spec of what people want. We were like, you know what? Our gut's telling us this. We're going to go, this is what's needed. So we're going to go and do that. And that led to the interesting idea that we ended up advancing. And I did see a bunch of hands, so I'm going to read a poem. So here we go. The COVID, they live on the wisps of our breath, the drift of a cough. Invisible, needy they cling for the touch of our skin. Like a childish lover they beg, always to be near, crying away in streams of salt when properly sanitized. They hold on metal for a good 12 hours to hope that they may even lick the palm of your hand, to kiss you with death when you wipe your tired brow, only so that they can turn to their friend and say, yeah, I really took his breath away. So that interesting thought experiment poem led to this idea, which is website stopthecovid.com. We essentially thought, you know, we built an app which was focused on introverts. Maybe we can take that same infrastructure, that same tech infrastructure, reskin it to something that would actually help people manage logistics of those in isolation. we did a bunch of different development pilots around that, conducting, okay, maybe this is what the needs could look like, this is the solutions we could provide. You can actually go to the website and sign up if you're bored and tired of hearing me speak. You can see we got a bunch of likes, so we were really excited about it. But at the end of the day, about a month into it, I realized, you know, we're a little bit under-resourced in terms of actually being able to execute on this and be relaunched. So I had to kind of make a tough decision, and my team helped. Actually, they were really helpful because they said, Tim, I feel like Kelsey in particular was like, you know, Tim, I feel like you might be trying to force something by pushing this app infrastructure that you developed for Beaver Lodge onto the Stop the COVID story. Maybe it should be something else. And we're at the point right now with this COVID-19 response where we weren't able to launch it quite fast enough to what the opportunity really needed. And we're testing right now. Currently, there's a kind of competition going on with the Arusha Center. Maybe there's some interest in using it as a kind of mental health tool and drawing competition to support local businesses. But we're even holding that with a really open hand, because we realize that we've got only so many resources, and we would love to see, I mean, like the playful, positive nature of a way to look at a virus go out there. Partially because I think we stress kids out enough these days with the news, and I thought, why don't we take the story of a virus and turn it into something more playful that can still be just as impactful for changing the right behaviors. So if you really like those designs, you thought that was an interesting way to view the virus, and you're interested in actually doing some work to make it live, I'm holding that with a very open hand. You can see there's my open hand. And I would love to partner / pass off to anyone who wants to like run with it and make their own, because I've got a lot of other exciting stuff to do, which is what we did in spite of COVID-19. So quick drink of water, and I'm watching time, so I'll try not to go too much longer. So how does a grassroots tech company handle a global financial crisis? The keys to building a good tech product are, one of the suggested strategies, and that is quite helpful, is something called the leading approach, which is essentially you create an MVP to test your riskiest assumption. And for us, the big riskiest assumption we had for our business model is, are people going to answer 20 questions about their house? Do people give a damn enough to actually download an app, put in a bunch of information about their house to get something? Like, are they going to do that much work? So that was a thing we were really trying to focus on with our beta product of Beaver Lodge, which is now on both the Apple and Google Play Store. We're going to have a new update coming out shortly. But to really answer that question, we went through a bunch of different iterating. And the cool thing, I mean, not cool thing, the reality about the virus is, as a tech company, things didn't really change so much. Even our developers were just stranded in their homes, so they could work more. And we really went through a bunch of iterations. My team laughs at me when they look at how crude our first wireframes were. But the end result is that G was able to pull together something really powerful for a couple different reasons. From a tech perspective, the sessions on the app are direct server to user, which meant that it simplified development, which decreased development costs, but also increased security. We were also able to build it kind of while we were bored during the midst of COVID-19, so that it has dynamic updates via the backend. So there's a backend server and there's a backend administration that I can change all the questions, I can change all the products, and change all the actions really quickly on the fly, as well as having a fully serviced chatbot built right into the application. Getting all that for the price tag that G was able to build it for is extremely incredible, especially on the tight timeline. So yeah, G was amazing. And the other big part of it, what we've really been building, is now it has a very modular structure. So the three main sections are audits, actions, and products, but they're distinct, so we can tweak and experiment with different pieces of the puzzle really quickly, which is powerful from a business lens, and also as someone trying to find out, okay, what's the right product to meet this need in the market. We've done a couple different launch engagement experiments. This is like different marketing pushes. You can see how they're tied directly to COVID-19. The fact that recognizing, okay, you're saying you're at your house already. Why not get some value out of that by doing an audit of your house, scoring your home efficiency, and then playing with a game with your neighbors to get discounts on upgrades. These are the main results of the MVP question to date. And that is, like, will people answer the full 20 questions about their house? The majority of them have. A lot of those are friends and family. And what we're really pushing out now is the same prototype that's on the App Store, pushing it out to key focus groups to get a clear sense of the answer by the end of June. I had a really good phone call yesterday, actually, with this guy. He's David Allison, and he's the head of, he founded something called Value Graphics, which is a new way to view marketing information. It shies a lot away from demographics, which I think is really actually insightful and scientific rather than culture-based. And he's done over 500,000 surveys, 8 times multiplier effect on marketing spend using this information. And he gave me a bunch of the responses that people said, okay, this is how people will treat the environment differently after COVID-19 based off of a representative sample of the entire population of the US through one of the biggest sociological studies of all time. I can't share the exact specifics of what he didn't want me to put on slides, but he gave me some really helpful insights that I'm looking forward to put into our marketing content over the next few weeks. I'm going to quickly jump to the last section about how this really impacted our perspectives on COVID-19 really impacted my perspective, especially as someone who I read a lot and kind of realized that everything is a theory, and these are just some of the books I've read. That lady in the bottom is Joanne Robinson, who's a really smart economist. All these books are really interesting for specific reasons. The one on the top right, I would highly recommend. I read it 2 months before COVID-19 happened, and a little bit because of that, and also because I wanted to invest in my own business, I pulled all my money off the stock market. So it worked out in my favor. But I highly recommend any one of these books for neuroscience understanding, behavioral. B.F. Skinner is one of the top psychologists of the last century. Nassim Nicholas Taleb really helped me understand data. This is the top left corner is a picture of the elders and residence room at the Calgary Library. Highly recommend going there. You can go and learn from an Indigenous elder, and they have a lot of really insightful perspectives. But you can read this long, complex sentence if you download the slide deck later on. I won't bore you with that. But essentially, the conclusion from this thought experiment for me is that a lot of the globalization was built as a result of World War II and as a tool for peace. So now that we've achieved that, maybe we can rethink some of the implications of that. As I see it, technology at its best accelerates collaboration by diminishing the need for a amygdala response. I think that's pretty obvious, but happy to chat more about that afterwards. I don't want to dwell on it. But as I see it, the big challenge we need to solve in civic tech is kind of a version of the prisoner's dilemma, where the economy and the system is set up in such a way where it's more difficult to a rational individual. They lose more if they cooperate with their neighbor than if they don't cooperate with their neighbor. In the world of game theory, that's called the prisoner's dilemma, where if 2 prisoners go to prison and they get separated, how does one know the other is not going to rat him out? And they end up both ratting each other out, and they both spend more time in prison. I think we're facing somewhat of a similar problem with a lot of our local economy and a lot of our local elements, especially in terms of the housing market. And that's why I'm really exploring something I call creatively blockchain. So it's essentially asking how technology and society can be organized around one simple metric, and that is increasing connections at the neighborhood level. Beaver Lodge is kind of one piece to that puzzle, but I think the whole answer to that question is going to take a much bigger community involvement. And if you're interested in exploring that more, please send me an email, dreams@beaverlodge.game, and we can chat about that in particular. Kind of rushing on to the 5 tactical lessons for me as we launched in the midst of COVID-19 and some of the other things. 1, really know the scale of an idea. I think I tried to make Stop the COVID bigger than it should have been. 2, know your personality and build with the team rather than trying to do everything yourself. 3, skin in the game advisors are really, really, really valuable. And skin in the game, read Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book on the topic to understand more about that. But essentially, because life is so complex, it's hard to give insight. And a lot of the most important insights to a problem are the emotional insights, which you develop over having gone through similar experiences in your own life. And the 4th one is kind of the tension between being a starving artist or just a lean execution machine, which goes, and doesn't question whether or not they're on the right path. And the last one is just the importance of really growing an intuition for low information decisions. Because when you're trying to act rather than react in the market, you have to make a lot of decisions with very little information. And I'm more than willing to flesh any of these out if you're interested in hearing my thoughts more, but I want to leave time for questions. Just as I kind of wrap up here, we all know that the world's a mess. Mental picture I kind of see it in is we walk down the street, we see garbage all the time. I wonder, okay, could anyone pick that up? But yet we also see things changing. And the fact of the matter is we don't know if that improvement happens. It could happen 2 ways. One way is someone walked down that street and picked up all the garbage, or maybe 500 people walked down the street and were like, you know what, I'm going to pick up 1 piece of garbage, even if it doesn't make a difference. And then lo and behold, at the end of 500 people walking by the street, you have no more garbage. But either way, it's always easier retrospectively, and it takes some stubborn action on everyone's part to be like, you know what, I am going to do this, even if it seems ambiguous and overwhelming. I'd say over 80% of the story of the technological and exciting development of Beaver Lodge is still to be written. I have a couple of people in mind for this, but we're really looking for kind of recruiting for metrics and reporting craftsman person who could help us with a couple of those things on the screen. Send me an email at admin@beaverlodge.game if you have any thoughts of someone you know who might be a good fit for that role. And I'd love to meet with them or have a call with them and chat some more. And yeah, so in summary, we have an app. It's now on both app stores. I'm really excited about it because it's a nationwide scaled product for anyone in Canada that will help them be able to reduce their emissions by 50% per home and reduce their utility costs without taxing them either psychologically or financially, because that's what technology does. It allows us to scale positive impact a lot faster. It's fully secure to a fintech level, even though we don't have banking information on our app. And it's adaptable to unique experiments, and designed with simplicity and minimal operating costs. I feel like I've been motor mouthing for the last 20 minutes, and time has flown by. Hopefully you felt it flew by in a good way. And questions? Oh, and if you have any critiques, send them to the email address on the screen, or nice comments, or just jokes.
That's great, Tim. Thanks so much. It's fascinating stuff. So please, everyone, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I will pass them along to Tim. The presentation deck will be available, and as will the recording of the session. So sometime tomorrow, probably, if you go back to the event, this meetup event on the CivicTech meetup site, I'll put in a comment for this event that will have the link to the recording as well as to the presentation deck.
Yeah, I'd love to, and please reach out. I actually, despite all of my confusing emails, they all work. I'd love to chat about things with people, and hear different thoughts. I know that we do not have by any stretch the whole picture. There's a lot of other important perspectives.
Right. So there's a few questions coming in. There's one that says, in the opinion of this person, we don't really have a common perspective like having been in a world war or something like that. So how and why would somebody, anyone, kind of work with people that don't have that kind of shared experience? So what's driving us when we don't have shared experience? I guess you could say though that COVID is a shared experience, maybe one.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think there's a couple different answers to that. I think one of it is from a really high level perspective, it's the magic of, I mean, there's the magic of linguistic theory in the first place, and that's significant because top linguists around the world look at humans and say, how the heck why is our entire language, why are all our languages so similar? They could be completely different. Why are they so similar? So there's some like core biological groundings aside from even our base physical needs. I think COVID-19 is one of those tools of alignment because it is a shared story. And the other part of it, and this kind of, I'm sad about this, but it's unfortunately, or I think it's unfortunate that this is the case, but so much of the last 200 years has been a story of assimilation, kind of getting people to all play the same economic game. And that means that we all bleed dollars. And at the end of the day, that's like the biggest part of our shared experience, and that is a response to a couple different things, but I think it is possible. And part of the reason why I'm so confident on this is it's my own lived experience. And maybe this is just, I'm a unique random person, but I literally have lived on both sides, adamantly on both sides of most major social political issues. And I still have amazing friends in both camps, and I find that their values are a lot more similar than we sometimes realize.
Okay, good, thanks for that. There's a question around what kind of book recommendations you would have. So there is the one slide in the deck.
Go back to that.
Like and we don't have to go through it in detail right now, yeah, but that's probably the best source. I mean, if you
that's the only other one, and this is actually Gio mentioned this one I'm reading right now, is called The Alchemist. Loving it, a great novel. I think it has a lot of insight. I'm also reading stuff by Gabor Mate. But I'd love to, depending on what you're looking for, I have, I mean, I think the single biggest book on that list, I think in terms of mind-blowing potential, is the one on the top right corner, The Misbehavior of Markets. And in terms of personal growth, maybe My Plastic Brain, because Caroline Williams has a lot of really practical insights from the world of neuroscience in a very compelling way.
Okay, cool. So can you talk a little bit more about what it means to be a social enterprise, and how is that different from being a nonprofit?
Right. So we're actually, we're incorporated as a corporation. So we're not structured as a social enterprise, but I call ourselves a social enterprise because we have, like, that's the ethos of our team. That's what we care most about. I chose to be a corporation rather than being a nonprofit because I wanted to be able to scale our positive impact really quickly. And if you want to do that, you need to be a corporation. There is no, there are things like B Corps, but without getting too much into detail on it, they're not legally that different from regular corporations. And if we were to become a nonprofit, then we wouldn't be able to kind of rapidly scale. So social enterprise, I think, and this is my own personal opinion, I could be wrong, I think even when I was at PwC, they were making huge strides to try to become more like a social enterprise. So over time, we're going to see that social enterprises kind of becomes the de facto norm for any company. In order for them to exist and operate, they need to become a social enterprise. But yeah, if you want detailed answers, please reach out.
Sure. Okay. So, well, based on your research and the survey that you did, like, who would you say are the most vulnerable in our society, and how are they impacted by COVID? So, like, what are their needs and that sort of thing for that, based on your perspective?
I honestly, I don't think our survey really revealed that, just because those who are most vulnerable wouldn't even have time to answer our survey.
Mm.
There are a lot of really vulnerable populations. I think the cases that, man, I wish I could find some way to help them, is a lot of domestic abuse cases that now it's like there used to be escapes, but now there are no escapes. There are really organizations like the Alex Foundation, the Alex Community Center, that are doing good work in that space. But I think the one part of, I think, because of my European background, where like a violent revolution was so key in our family history, that's kind of always in the back of my head, is like, are people just going to go crazy and then start a riot? Which would really make me sad, because history has shown that violent revolutions against government usually do not make positive system change. And what we really want is positive system change. So that scares me a little bit, but I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Okay, good. A couple questions about your app. What % of family and friends did not answer all 20 questions?
I like how you asked that question. I'm not going to go to the chart because
that's okay.
I didn't update the newest information.
Yeah.
But what percentage of family and friends? I don't have that. It's probably like 30%. So like, admittedly, there are some challenges. It's still a beta product.
Right.
But
and by how much would you expect that to be reduced in your typical focus group?
Do you mean as we improve the product itself? Like, I mean, I'm assuming that's, yeah, I guess they can't really give follow-ups, but as I see it, I think it's going to drastically improve. The thing is, there's a ton of ways to make apps easier to use. There's an extremely complex, organized science around how can I make it so someone spends 3 seconds less doing a 5-second task. So that's kind of a linear problem. And I know that we can improve the app itself to make it more user-friendly. There's a ton of things we can do, but that's not the most important question for us right now as a company. We are exploring that, and we are working on making the product better, but you can build a perfect product. And actually, the story of Uber is quite interesting. I was chatting with someone who, he was chatting with, blanking on the name right now, but he's a local tech, really successful individual, the guy from Calgary who went to Garrett Champ, and he was chatting with him. And one of the reasons that Uber succeeded was because they got out there earlier, even when they were really embarrassed about the product. So that's part of the reason why I put it out there before it was perfect. But it's what we had to work with, I'm really, really proud of it and the work you did.
Okay. All right. Maybe this will be the last question, maybe a good one to leave on. It says that Bill Gates would argue that the world is its best that it's ever been. Would you agree? And then after reading Steven Pinker's The Better Angles of Our Nature, I might agree things are better. So,
yeah, I would definitely agree that the world is the best that it's ever been. So I'd agree with Bill Gates on that. Steven Pinker, he has really good points. You should really read Nassim Nicholas Taleb, or at least follow him on Twitter, because he provides a really, I think, healthy and important contrast to, he takes a lot of chunks out of Steven Pinker and some other people like Yuval Harari, but I think it's really important to have that breadth of conversation, because you mentioned some things that the super academic community has really been missing. So I definitely think that the world's getting better. This slide right here, and I kind of rushed through it, but let me jump to it. It is actually a great note to end on. So for whoever asked this, thank you so much for the question. This book, Humankind by Rutger Bregman, there's been this article going around on Facebook about the real life Lord of the Flies. So Lord of the Flies is a literary book that basically said, if you put a bunch of boys on an island, they're gonna just eat each other and it's gonna get violent. There's a real life story where that actually happened and the opposite was the case. And that's part of what this book is about. At its core, one of the biggest driving factors behind why I turned down a really promising job with Code for Canada to do this was just because I think so much of the business environment has been built around the assumption that people are not good, that people are always wanting to cheat the system. And in the auditing world, I lived that firsthand. But I firmly believe that neuroscience and so many other things have shown a really clear case that that is not actually the case. And especially as we have more technology, it's not about whether or not people are good. It's about how simple it is to design a system that makes it easier for people to be good than not good. So I try not to get too much into the philosophical weeds of like, are humans basically good or are humans basically evil? I think we do know that it's a lot easier to be kind to someone if you have food in your belly and you have family that loves you. And technology is enabling us to do that at exponential levels. And I think, yeah, I'm really optimistic about that. I do have depressed days, but that's usually because of other reasons.
Okay, so on that positive note, we'll end there. And so, thanks, Tim, so much for all of your insights. We're looking for great things from you in the future and all your initiatives. Thanks everybody for joining us this evening. You will, as I said, find the presentation deck and the recording on our meetup site there in a day or so. And keep in touch and look out for our future events as we go online and stay online through this crisis. So take care, stay home, stay safe, and all the best to all of you. Good night.